Right. Hey, Bruce. Welcome.
How are you, my friend? It's good to see you this morning.
Yeah, likewise. Good morning, I guess. Can't believe we're at the 1st of August already.
Amazing. The years just flown by. I agree.
Yeah. Are you vacationing at all, or?
I just got back actually. I went to Michigan for about a week, and then I just recently got back from Las Vegas last week. I had to go there for a business conference. So just ready for it's the dog days of summer. We're getting ready for fall. So that's the state I'm in right now. So the temperatures are still warm, but down here in the States, I'm ready for football season. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we'll be getting into hockey season up here pretty soon.
Oh yeah, love it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for joining me. Congratulations. I've been following a lot of what you've been doing. It's really amazing. I'm very excited for you and for us today. I want to really dive into a little bit in your methodology. There's just so much that you've been doing. It's actually very exciting. So I hope you don't mind me asking a lot of questions today. I'll try to put you on the spot. No, I'm joking, but it's great. So you've got 20 years experience working in corporate environment, small business. You've done so many things over the years. I'll let you do your introduction, but I'm excited to talk about your methodology, your book launch. I hope we have enough time today.
No, terrific. Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. We've talked a few times, and I really enjoy it. Before I get into anything about me, I want to let you know I'm excited about, you got a couple of books coming up here in the foreseeable future, I know, and a lot of exciting stuff there for both, the leadership side and the coaching side. And I've had a chance to watch some of I've subscribed, as you know, to everything you do. And I love the podcast you did. I particularly like the one you did a few months ago with Bowdy Bragg when he was talking about his leadership coaching. And I myself, being in that business, hope to be someone like him someday. But it's definitely a pivotal time in the coaching business. That I was just reading some statistics that came out recently that there's about close to $3 billion in coaching going on internationally on an annual basis. 55% of that is in our area of the world, in North America, so U.S. and Canada. Wow. So certainly that's a large amount, and it's growing at 6 to 7% on an annual basis. So I think there is a need for coaching, and the bulk of it is in leadership, which is the area I reside, which I'll talk about momentarily. 60 to 70% of the Fortune 500 companies utilize coaching in their organization, heavily for senior executives in particular. And in addition to that, most of that is leadership coaching as well. So got a lot of competition out there for what I'm attempting to do as an executive coach. I focus, as you know, extensively on principled leadership to build a foundation, and then ultimately evolving into transformational leadership as you go on. So that's where my focus is, and that's where the upcoming book, The Bruce to the Third Power System, is focused. And to flip the script, I love what your research does, because it's so scientifically oriented, and be able to identify what drives bias and how people make decisions and everything that's under the covers as to how the world happens. That I think is really pivotal to be able to weigh. My stuff is primarily empirical examples and research, what people are doing currently. But I love the scientific end of it, which you guys bring to the table, which is so important to understand the motivations for why people are doing things, particularly in today's high pressure world. Things happen so rapidly, particularly with AI out there. But I would argue that leadership's more important than ever, that the AI tool is only as good as the leaders who are using it to operate it. And that's where I think it's critically important that good leadership be in place right now for organizations to thrive. More so, I would advocate the perspective more so than ever before.
Yeah. You hit it on the head, and that's where the synergy between what you're doing and what I'm doing comes into play. I think, we're more focused on the tools and the science, and giving coaches like yourself and leaders the ability to accelerate that whole process. But at the end of the day, the methodology that you bring and the way leaders work with their teams is really it's unique in every instance. It's unique in every situation, and I often get asked the question, can we have a formula to fix this type of situation? I go, you know what, every situation is different. How can I do that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really loving the fact that and you and I just connected straight off the bat the first time we met. There's just so much synergy around that, and we haven't really talked enough about your E3 method.
Yeah.
I'm just going to try and put that image up just so that you can maybe talk a little bit about that. Let me see if I can get the technology working properly here.
Sure. Perfect.
Yeah, look at that. Maybe we make this one bigger somehow. I don't know if I can do that. It's not letting me, but you can talk to that probably.
Yeah, I'll take it from here. Ultimately, I spent a lot of my life researching leadership and trying to figure out what are the most important aspects. And then finally, about a year ago, I decided to write a book, The Bruce the Third Power System. And that's really what I think, in a nutshell, from an acronym perspective, drives what I believe leadership to be all about. The foundation is going to be ethics, and it's going to be integrity, and it's going to be vision and communicating a clear vision to your team. But ultimately, once you do that, if you have strong branding of yourself internally, and you have the ability to come back from difficulties, which is resilience, you understand your people, which I call the people principle, and you communicate with them, that builds a foundation for principled leadership, which ultimately, once you engage the E to the third power, execution, engagement, and empowerment, that enables you to become a transformational leader. If you're successful at setting that foundation, and I would equate that, a couple of good examples, from the States are, Howard Schultz, who is at Starbucks, or Steve Jobs at Apple, who probably, you would argue, while I wouldn't necessarily advocate every leadership perspective they might have had necessarily, they certainly were transformational leaders for their organization. And there's several examples independent of that, but those are the types of folks that I'm talking about, which build this sort of environment where leadership can thrive.
Yeah, so I look at that, and the first one is that resilience, right? And sometimes I call it being so stubborn, that you have to be committed, right?
Yeah.
And some people, give up too soon. So how do you've developed this obviously through experience. Where did that come from originally for you?
Well, it's something that I think is a truism all of us know, even before you do the research. And I know a lot of the research you've done points to the importance of resilience. But ultimately, my experience in corporate America, every quarter there's a new financial report that gets released. The investors react to that. And some are better than others, and you have to be able to navigate those seas. And particularly, if you look at the Great Recession from 15 years ago that we went through and all the difficulties associated with that, the ability to be resilient from that is critically important for any leader. You can build upon failure if you fail forward and you learn from mistakes you've made and be able to make difficult decisions sometimes to be able to improve. But those sorts of environments build all of the fuel to get where you want to go and succeed if you stay focused. And that's where the importance of what I call the positivity principle and keeping people on board, and also the vision you've already created to keep people on board is critically important. But the resilience is something that has been proven time and time again is necessary in order to be successful. Michael Jordan, the American basketball player, didn't make the varsity on his high school basketball team his sophomore year. And, this is a guy who went on to be arguably certainly the most decorated athlete of my adult lifetime in the States, in basketball, most notably. And so certainly, that sort of example you can take from that. And he ended up, when he checked into every hotel as a professional basketball player, he checked in under the name of the guy who beat him out, who was a friend of his, to make the varsity on his basketball team, reminding him of how a failure once happened in his life was something he needed to remember in order to catapult him to success. And that's a great illustration. There's several others of failing forward.
Yeah. So clarity and focus is important, and sticking with it as opposed to constantly wanting to throw stuff out and start over. That doesn't work. I often see a lot of new startups, and it's different in the corporate world because they've got hopefully their brand and their identity clear. But a lot of people tend to switch up very often and change things too quickly. I use an analogy of golf. I hope you don't mind that one, but if you keep changing your grip and your stance and all of these things, you never figure out what actually works. Your brain, from a neuroscience point of view, doesn't do the learn and adjust and myelinate and develop those pathways. So focus and clarity sounds like that comes before resilience. Would you say brand?
Yeah, I think that's. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, that's part of your brand that you create. I advocate the perspective that you really create a brand from the time you join an organization. It's from the moment you're interviewing, even arguably, that you create a perception of who you are. And certainly it's difficult in today's social media driven world to be able also to not listen to all the chatter, that if something doesn't work initially, that you're going to constantly get advice that you should switch up, particularly if you're going against the prevailing winds or the perspective of an organization historically. There's going to be a hesitation if someone comes in who decides to depart that perspective and go in a different direction. So you certainly need to be agile enough, and I want to be clear about this, and I know you agree, to be able to pivot when things aren't working, and that's been proven. Right. You have to try something, and fail forward in order to be successful as a leader. You're not going to succeed everywhere. And one other thing I should add as a sidebar, and this is in my book as well that comes out in a few weeks, Bruce the Third Power System. There's no such thing as a perfect leader. That particularly in today's world where everything is so heavily researched and information circulates so rapidly, that I could offer a name as being a perfect leader, and other people could offer arguments as to why they weren't in areas they failed. So leadership's really a daily event. It's about what did you learn today and how can you capitalize on that to lead toward a better tomorrow. That is critically important for any leader, and you have to be able to deal with the fact you're going to fail sometimes. Thus, the importance of resilience. When I found myself thinking about the book, I think that the resilience is something we really have to be able to acknowledge is critically important as a learning opportunity for people to improve and organizations to be able to thrust themselves forward. You got to be able to endure the bad times to enjoy the good.
Mm-hmm. And that I'm almost backing into some of your design here. The thought that comes to mind from that is culture. Right.
Yes.
And so, with brand and communication, then you're really empowering, engaging, and executing at the culture level as well. Would you agree with that, or am I interpreting more into that than I should?
110%. Yeah, absolutely. And some of the research you guys have done, looking at the site and everything, with the Behavioral Institute, research, it definitely substantiates that. I think culture is critically important. It's the fuel in the gas tank to get you where you want to go. When I was an executive, I was fortunate enough to lead an engagement campaign that led to certification as a great place to work, and a number of other awards related to that, which were all, in a nutshell, driven by the engagement of the team and getting them in the right direction. And engagement isn't a light switch. It's not something you can flip on all at once. It's really like, the birth of a butterfly. It takes a long time to grow and evolve for that to happen. And the only way you can set the stage there, and this is what I point out in the book, is to be a principled leader with vision and integrity, a clear vision, and then branding, resilience, communication, and understanding. All of that builds the base, which enables you to eventually reach things like engagement, empowering your team. And that's really the level at which leadership multiplies. And so that's, all of that is primarily dependent upon engagement. It can't be a handful of people making all the decisions, not evaluating those decisions and not appreciating feedback from the team. You're going to make some good decisions. If you're a leader, a broken clock is right twice a day. But, in order to continually make good decisions, perpetuate the organization in the right direction, staying positive and having the ability to engage the team is critically important for them to get on board and reach a point of critical mass of support so you can achieve your strategic objectives as an organization.
Excellent. Love it. And I've got my E squared. You're one up on me.
Even before we knew each other, it's funny that was, we had that in common.
And it's to do with engagement, but I add experience. And I think that comes into maybe your understanding the team. So, when I talk about the E squared, I talk about, engaging people at their level, at their experience level. Is that where you bring understanding into that?
It is. I call it the people principle in my work. And that's really what I'm talking about. And positivity is a component of that. Emotional intelligence is a component of that. How do you manage your own emotions as well as others? Can you leverage that to be successful? The research on that is fascinating, on emotional intelligence and how critically important that is. And what you do see is typically the leaders who get the most credit for being successful are the ones who are highly emotionally intelligent and recognize how to leverage that for success. So yeah, all of that is critically important. That's part of the understanding, is being able to appreciate the entire team. One thing that's important to understand, depending upon the size of your organization, and I've worked for companies, up to 30,000 employees, that message needs to be clear to all of them. And it's got to be reiterated, and it's got to be constantly supported, and it's got to be something that's clear enough that everyone throughout the organization, from frontline to C-suite, can understand. And that's oftentimes very challenging for leaders to do, for a large organization, particularly ones that operate internationally, which I've got some experience with. That, how do you get this message out to everyone in an understandable fashion? And then do you continually relay those messages? That one thing I found with engagement is it can't be a 1-year campaign. It's got to be extended beyond that and be able to evolve in different ways to enable you to be successful outside the parameters of where you started. When you look at, as an example, what Amazon is today versus the way they started, it's a totally different company. Nike as well. That, you need to have the ability to evolve and make astute decisions, and also put the right people around you to help you reach those conclusions. And oftentimes those conclusions are going to come from other people, even all the way down to the front lines. A lot of the best engagement solutions we were able to implement in my corporate world came from the front line, where people would tell us, because we were constantly surveying and evaluating data and trying to find in our university classes feedback from managers, what were the most common issues identified in interactions with them, and how can we react to those things. That sort of synergy between the front line to the C-suite and be able to make those decisions is critically important for them to feel valued, but also for them, because they feel valued, to want to do the best they can for the organization and to stick around because it's an organization they believe values them. As I mentioned in the book, and I'm certainly not the first person to say this, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah. So it's almost like a two-way thing, when they understand the direction and the objectives and are empowered in that function, then they perform better, they focus better, they get clarity and so forth. But then, the flip side of that is understanding them. And, in my U squared, it's understanding that you can't treat everybody the same, because they're all at different experience levels, right?
Yes.
A new person needs a different level of support than someone who's a seasoned person, right?
Yes.
So that engagement has really multi-layer kind of focus around that, right?
It does. And in addition to that, if you flip the script, if you don't allow yourself to appreciate internal feedback and be able to appreciate others' opinions, even if you don't necessarily act upon it, if you need to acknowledge it and empathize with people, that their opinions and perspectives are valued, it's extremely dangerous. You're going to find some companies, a good illustration in recent, 20 years ago, Nokia was the most prominent, cell phone company in the world. But and when Apple first started testing the iPhone and coming out of the iPod and everything, Nokia's internal research told them that they thought eventually Apple would get 4 or 5% of the market. They really perceived that it'd be primarily techies like us who really wanted the technology, and they had previous Apple products that they liked. They didn't think the overall consumer base would be driving toward an iPhone, because Nokia had great confidence in their technology. I had a Nokia for years and loved it at that time, I will point out.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it certainly turned out that the iPhone, completely turned them into a situation where they were an afterthought as an organization. And so you have to be able to appreciate what your competitors are doing and react to that. So many companies over the years, I remember when I was younger in school, using a Brother typewriter and stuff like that. And obviously now with word processing and computers, nobody has to use a typewriter. But I can remember at the time thinking, wow, this is the greatest typewriter I've ever owned. It allows you to erase the previous word that you just did without any difficulty, because it wouldn't print the line until the end of the sentence. So those sorts of things, technology will help you today, but you've got to constantly be evolving in order to be better tomorrow. And I know you're a techie. I'm sure you can appreciate that, because particularly in today's world where technological evolution is evolving more rapidly, that ability to identify competition and react, and to get the team on board with the strategic decisions you're making to react, is critically important in order to maximize your competitiveness.
Yeah, and my gosh, the world is moving so quickly as well, without taking us down the AI path, but there is just so much that we need to understand and leverage and balance, right?
Yes.
So one of the formulas that I also throw out there a little bit is, you can do all of this stuff, but if people aren't empowered and engaged at the right level, they don't stay. Right?
Absolutely. You have to get them on board. And oftentimes, in fact, the predominant amount of times, it's before you even interact with them. Have you built enough credibility with them in your trust bank account, shall we say, that they're going to be able to back you when you really need them to? And that's all about engagement. You don't start with empowerment. It's the last level where leadership multiplies, because you've educated them enough, and because you spend enough time together evolving the relationship that enables you to be able to drive them to do difficult challenges down the road. Moreover, your research recently, your recent webinars related to bias and the bias trap and all that, right? Can you as a leader resist the types of traps that are out there that will drive you to have a bias against something that you may not even fully realize you have that bias, unless you have the ability to diagnose it and to react to it. I know you guys have the daily bias recognition and identifying where your bias might be as a potential solution to bias. That's really important, particularly in today's world. The media overwhelms us with messages, and there's so many conventional perspectives we'll just assume are correct without giving it too much thought as to why that's the case. And they're reiterated consistently within media that, you've got to have the ability to fully recognize what is the truth, and the truth is constantly evolving. And if you don't have that ability, it's going to make it very challenging for you to make rational decisions, and even more challenging to communicate that to your team so they're going to get on board. They're not going to automatically agree with everything that you're going to be proposing. And moreover, and one of the things I should probably point out before I forget, look, this is particularly true in the States. These are divided times. It's more divided than ever before. But in the workplace, we all have to play for the same team. So it's really, as a leader now, can you get everyone with the variety of perspectives they have on the same page to believe in your shared objectives, to be able to work cooperatively towards shared objectives, is critically important, particularly in a divided world where that's more and more challenging every day.
Yeah, getting everybody rowing in the same direction instead of pulling in lots of different directions, right?
Absolutely.
Or worse still, everybody's there for their own personal agenda rather than, being aligned to the goals and objectives. This is the passion and conviction, I guess, that inspires and motivates. I think it goes two ways. It inspires and motivates the team, which reverse then the effect is it inspires and motivates the leader to be excited by the team, right?
Yeah, it creates great synergies and can build on itself. Success can, failure can go the other way. It can get more challenging when you look at how things typically evolve. There's usually an effect which happens, which can cascade positively or negatively depending on how you react, and that's where the resilience comes in. That when things start to go a little bit negative, how are you reacting to that? What are we doing to try and overcome that? What's our plan? John Wooden, the famous UCLA basketball coach, who's one of the leaders I research the most, once famously said, a failure to plan is a plan for failure. And then other people have said that similarly, but I love John because of how simple things he was able to communicate. And it's perfectly understandable when you think about it, that you have to put a plan together and not everything's going to work. It's about how you react to that that's going to dictate whether you'll be successful in the longer run. And oftentimes those setbacks in the short term can build the stage for long-term success if you have the resilience and wherewithal necessary to be able to navigate those turbulent waters while it's happening.
Yeah. We all wish we had a crystal ball that we could tell what the future is going to be. And I love the Apple philosophy of you got to pull the trigger, otherwise you're living in a vacuum. You don't really know what the future is going to do unless you test something and put it out there. It's not going to work out exactly the way you think it's going to work out. So resilience, being able to adapt and grow. This is humanity, actually, when we're talking about that. That's how we grow and evolve. We didn't learn to walk by instantly being able to stand up and walk. We had to bump our head a few times. We had to take our falls a few times, get that feedback and go, maybe I didn't do that right. I need to balance. And so the workplace is a lot like that, right?
I agree, totally. One of the companies that I have researched over the years and I'm most fascinated with is Nike. Phil Knight, who created Nike. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and they're based out of Beaverton, which is a suburb of Portland. And, and have been constantly fascinated with them. Phil Knight's built one of the most, with the Nike swoosh, one of the top 3 to 5 logos in the world, and their philosophy is just do it. That's it. Just execute.
Do it.
Right?
Simple.
That I talk about. So simple, yet we forget about it so often. We spend so much time, and I argue this in the execution chapter. You can go one of two ways, which are typically make it difficult to be successful: is waiting too long and trying to overthink a problem, or acting too soon before you know enough information. That ability to react when the time is right is critically important. Nike was originally just a shoe company. Now they're primarily known for a wide variety of things. Shoes are still part of the equation, but obviously, clothing is primarily where they've gravitated to, and they become part of the culture as they're on most of the uniforms and the teams that are based in the States, that the professional teams play with, etc. And, having the ability to grow and also market yourself. They're a great illustration of branding, which is why I start with that. They affiliated themselves with athletes like Michael Jordan or Bo Jackson, who was a famous athlete in baseball and football in the late 80s, early 90s. I used to live in the South SEC, Southeastern Conference country. And those football players who are successful for those teams at the collegiate level, they become like Paul Bunyan. They become legends. And Bo Jackson was a great illustration of that. So Nike not only made products they were able to sell, obviously to their benefit on their bottom line, they made the right decisions who to affiliate with, and that it helped build their brand to become, not necessarily the top driver in their area, in their sector, to be the top, because of the type of branding they've been capable of doing, and to evolve that branding where it appears to make tactical sense.
Mm-hmm. And I guess some people would argue, and I can see it because, I've been involved in many different types of environments. And one of my early projects in my career was a military project where safety is an issue. So zero defect, you had to over-engineer things where, risk and safety and people lives are at risk, that's one situation. But
Yeah.
for most businesses, that's not the situation. You need to, you couldn't have launched the iPhone, for instance, without first launching the iPod and figuring, oh, people like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So testing and the just do it. A lot of people would go, oh no, I can't do that. I need to think through this. And there is a place for that, but there is also a place for you've engineered it enough. You need to pull the trigger on this thing, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, a good illustration, also Apple, if you remember if you use the iPod, it's over 20 years old, 20 coming up on 25 years. The simplicity of it, you just hit one button. It had the wheel where you could move things around, but you hit one button for it to come on. And this is really the way our iPhones are generated now, or even the other products, Samsung, et cetera, in the cell phone sector. The face recognition now, or a fingerprint, those sorts of things. Steve Jobs, when he was at Apple, recognized the importance of keeping things simple. And so he knew if you just had to hit one button that enables you to access all the technology in this little piece of equipment you're holding for whatever song you were going to listen to with the iPod was critically important. That he's somebody who was about every detail, arguably obsessive about it. He went to college at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, which is a small college, but it's academically, it's one of the best colleges in the country. And it's one of the toughest to get into. And, he went to college there. Well, the last semester he was at Reed, he dropped out of school because he didn't think his parents could afford it anymore. And he lived in the dorm lobby. And he would just go to the classes he thought he could learn the most from. And one of the ones that he was the most consistently willing to attend was calligraphy, because it fascinated him to look at images. And if you think of what the Apple computer looked like 30 years ago, the images, the font that they used on Apple was really impressive, and it captured your attention. And he was insistent upon that. He wanted something that captured people's attention, so that way they would be able to be more competitive. And now you look years later, even after Steve Jobs has passed, that the organization recognizes the importance of getting everything right and constantly learning, because they were initially seen as being primarily academic in their application and unsuccessful, versus IBM and the other competitors in the computer space. And certainly, obviously, they've overcome that, but they constantly have to be learning as well. And the other thing they understood is branding, which again is the first important issue I go over in my book. The Apple logo is one of the most recognizable in the world. And while it's been tweaked a couple of times, there's no question when you see that image, it conveys technological excellence and something that people in our culture gravitate toward. And that's notable, because setting yourself apart from all the various images we see on a daily basis now is a very challenging thing. And that's where the branding comes into play, regardless of the size of your organization. If you ever want to be a dominant factor, your branding is critically important.
Right. Yeah. Wow. There's just so much that pops in my head. You've been obviously down this path for many years. 20 plus years. I've seen a lot evolve in 40 years, we still come back to some of the key elements that were prominent back in the 70s and 80s, and things like identifying your niche. Are you a product leader? Are you a operational excellence or customer focus? And those things are still relevant today, right? Even with AI coming out and that all of the technology that's happening, the amount of information that's available today, there's just so much noise. You still got to come back to clarity, right? Simple.
Yes, absolutely. And that's where vision comes in, keeping it simple initially. The KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, some people like to use. It's easy to remember. But, I think that's critically important. The old ideas are constantly resurfaced, they're just packaged differently. And in our technologically driven world, particularly with AI, which is going to change our world, there's no question. AI is a significant, it's almost like the creation of the wheel. It's going to change the way we do everything, but it's only going to be as successful as the leaders allow it to be. As you know, when you use AI, you feed it information, it gives you information back. Most of the time, it's specific information that it knows that you want to get. And so its perspective will change over a period of time. Well, unless you're asking it the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers. So it's only going to be as successful as you enable it to be. And oftentimes that's going to be questioning your own premise on something. But to get back to your point, the fundamentals of being successful, having a clear vision, acting ethically, all those sorts of things, everything that's in my book are real life truisms that you could have put in a book, like, Good to Great or so many books over the years. This is the common denominator. Companies understand who they are and they routinely communicate that to their clientele and team in order to drive their success. Now, it will evolve over time. And certainly we've seen some companies, with Sony's a good example in technology. They've become ubiquitous in so many different areas. They didn't start there, but they evolved over time. And how did they learn to be successful? And what are other companies doing? And that's a challenge you face. If you look at, film and photography, Kodak was challenged with that, which at one time was the dominant player in that area. And ultimately that became very challenging. I can remember when I was in the entertainment space, they were trying to get into digital cinema, and they still do that in some areas, but it's not an area which is taken off as much. So you have to have the ability to consistently evolve because things are going to change. And that's, something that's critically important. The Tesla, whether you're in favor of Tesla or not, there's no question it has impacted what other car companies are doing as far as their product goes, as they want to integrate more computer screens and more technology in the way that they operate, all of which can be successful for the sector. So even though they might be out, have a product that is obviously intriguing to people and inviting, depending upon what your predilections are, other companies have to be able to react to that in the space, or else you're going to be have difficulty remaining competitive against the more dominant players, which are creating new, more exciting technologies.
And the world's moving quickly, and we need to learn to adapt. A simple book that comes to mind is "Who Moved My Cheese?" It's just hilarious. But it's so real. We can kind of put the blinders on. Oh, no, it's not going to affect us. It's not going to happen. I don't need to learn Facebook. I don't need to learn LinkedIn. And guess what? You need to not only learn those, but now you need to learn AI. You need to embrace all of these things. Otherwise, you become like a Nokia. You get left behind. You lose your edge. You can be on top one day, but if you're not keeping up with all of these things, you get left behind.
Yeah, Who Moved My Cheese? What a great example of just keeping it simple. It's funny. It's coincidental you mentioned that. When I first got in the learning and development space, and I've been in operations for a number of years, literally the very first book I read is Who Moved My Cheese? And, and it helped me get familiar with the way people operate and everything. And it was funny, 20 years later when Cineworld, we merged with them. They're based out of London. They're in Chiswick near London in England. And, the person who was the head of their learning and development from overseas came. We were having a discussion when we first met, and she mentioned, "Have you ever read Who Moved My Cheese?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's literally the first book I read when I came into this position." So it's simple. None of the details in Who Moved My Cheese is necessarily on point to where the world is today, but the way it relates to the way we operate as individuals is an important lesson to learn and understand in whatever you try and do. People have things they rely upon, and different sorts of, they have things they need in order to feel comfortable. And that is something we need to appreciate. We just can't assume because we put out an edict, the team is going to automatically react favorably to that.
Yeah. And isn't it great, just to touch on AccuMatch for a minute, the ability to use AccuMatch to map your team members and yourself. I can spot immediately by looking at the map who is going to be the person that is going to be stuck with change, because I can see sameness, I can see procedure, I can see the away from, so I can see those instantly in a map. It doesn't mean that those people can't learn and adapt and grow in those areas. It just means that they've been wired this way through experience. But the word wiring has, had context that we really need to remove, because we're all able to learn and adapt and change and grow and evolve, right? Um,
Yeah. Absolutely. Bowdy, Brad, the recent, interview you did with him talks about the very first thing he does and the key to his success as a coach. And he's been extraordinarily successful. He's had different businesses. He pivots back to coaching in between creating other businesses. But, the first thing he does is AccuMatch, and it allows him to identify where people's perspectives are. And he's able to design his value proposition around that, and be able to be more obviously impressive to and more appealing to the various businesses he's trying to work with. So that sort of technological driven solution can really be astutely utilized when you leverage it to enable you to drive your solutions toward the pain point the organizations or individuals have. And that obviously demonstrates your value. And so, very smart about that. AccuMatch is a great illustration of leveraging technology to enable you to be successful with human beings, which is really intelligent.
Yeah, yeah. And it fits very well, like I said, with your model there, because it starts the understanding of self and others, right? Which improves then communication. And when you get that all figured out, then you're aligning the brand. You can build resilience and trust. So empowerment is really about trust, right? I know I followed Patrick Lencioni for a long time with his pyramid, where trust is the foundation that everything is built on. Well, how do you get that? If you don't do the empowerment, engagement, and execution the way you've spelt it out here, you can't really build that trust where people come along on that journey and get it, and they buy into that, right?
Yes. Yeah. I've worked with organizations which haven't, particularly after mergers, you see this a lot. The trust isn't built yet, but they'll ask people to completely change the way they operate. And to say people, are going to be resistant is sometimes an understatement. They may even try and undermine what you're trying to do, and then step back and say, well, this isn't working. You should do what we've always done historically. You've got to have the ability to build that trust over a period of time as a foundation for you to be successful. Anyone who's been in a relationship before understands the pivotal importance of trust. And when trust is breached, how do you react to that and build that trust back up? It's more challenging every day that trust is in question. And you see this oftentimes in the States and businesses. You see it in politics, that constantly, what's the common denominator of undoing of people who are trying to succeed as politicians? It's if the base has questions with trust. And that's where you have to stay on message there. It doesn't mean you're never going to have problems. You have to be resilient, but you have to build that trust for that resilience to be able to kick in. And if it's not there, it's going to be even more challenging for you to overcome whatever specific setbacks you're facing.
Yeah. Wow. Just looking at the time, Bruce, we could talk for quite a lot longer, but I appreciate the insights. Love your model. I just really want to quickly let people know about your book coming out. Is it out yet, or is it coming out shortly?
It's not. This is my first book, and one lesson I've learned is that it takes time, and patience is definitely a virtue. So I'm working with my publisher / distributor right now, and they're going to be, we're about halfway through the final edits. The first half, it's got 12 chapters. The first 6, it's been written, for several months now, but it's just a function of dotting the I's and crossing the T's. But at this juncture, I'm targeting around Labor Day or shortly after in the States.
Okay.
So I think that'll probably be when it gets out there. And then I think hopefully people will have a better understanding of where my perspective is. But I'm really trying to take the concept of leadership development, which is very challenging and huge in terms of the variety of things you could talk about, and be able to break it down to a simple way to think about it. And if you put all those different items that was on the graphic previously there, you're going to be successful. And it's called the Bruce Third Power System, Unlocking Your Leadership Superpowers, because I believe that if you are able to do all of the things that are identified in the book as being the key ingredients, that'll make you like a superhero. You'll have superpowers, which will enable you to lead any team to success if you're able to stay focused on those basic principles.
Perfect. Awesome. And I hope you don't mind, I've put your email information down there. If somebody wants to reach out to you, can they do that via your Gmail, or do you have another email that you prefer?
That Gmail's fine. You can also go to my website, brucewren.com, and then that's another area where they can access the various services we have. And I'm also on LinkedIn in that way. So fairly easy to find. But if you're going to send me an email, that's the best one. Love working with both individuals or organizations to enable them to improve their leadership capabilities, to be ready for whatever challenges are ahead. And I also enjoy when the opportunity presents. I have a meeting actually next month in September in Miami as a keynote speaker, to keynote speaking opportunities where it makes sense. I love talking to people about leadership and helping people. That's something that's always been a primary motivator for me. And, I could talk forever about it. I don't want to take this conversation too much longer, but I love talking about it. And I sincerely appreciate you inviting me in to have this conversation, because I have great respect for the research you guys do, and the way you help me have further confidence in everything that I believe in is proven scientifically. I think is critically important, because that sort of, you can't just always go with your gut. You want to know what the research says, and you guys do as good a job as anyone of sharing that research and allowing us all to be better at what we do.
Thank you. And it's all about helping leaders become intelligent about themselves, their team, the culture, your E3 method. It doesn't matter what methodology. I keep saying to people, right? There are lots of talent out there. They just need to get on with it, right? So love it. Again, your E3 model, I'm going to steal some of this and play with my E2 model. And it just keeps things simple for people. So congratulations, my friend. It was good. We'll watch for comments and questions online. I'm sure you'll get some, we'll get some, and we'll deal with those as they come up. But again, thank you, Bruce. Congratulations. Love your success. We have to, I think, maybe schedule another follow-up post-book launch to really dive into helping you promote that. I think it would be awesome. Yeah,
I'd love to. Absolutely. I'm always available for you, my friend. You know that. I've enjoyed talking with you over the last several months, and would love to do this again once the book's out there and we have a chance to discuss things more extensively. And before we get off the line, good luck with your books as well. I know you've got multiple books coming out. Very exciting stuff in there for coaches and leaders, separately put out to enable whichever the audience finds themselves most appealing. They can look toward that. Really, happy to see the direction you're going, and wish you great success.
Thank you. And same challenge. We're going through the 5th revision, and I still have things that I want to put in there.
You've been down this path before, though. You'll be fine.
But we just need to get it out there. I think there'll be a version 2, I'm sure, after that. So, but right, take care. Love the synergy, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, my friend. Thank you. Have a great weekend.